What should we expect from a former MVP back with his old team? Is one rookie wideout in the AFC South about to be a must-grab off the waiver wire? And should Elijah Moore be started over a number one wideout on a low-volume pass offense this week? Plus, the 2021 FFPC main event 10th place team owner Praveer Shrivastava hangs out with us to talk about who he trusts in the Jets backfield, his waiver pickups ahead of this weekend's games, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now listening to the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com, with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here's Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Hey, thanks so much, Rob, and thank you to the Quiet Howlers. Remember to check out their music at quiethowlers.com or anywhere you find your music. Greetings and salutations, all you Balkaholics and Ferelliacs. It is indeed the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I am, of course, your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Wow, what a week it was, Farrell. We had Jordan Love make his debut. We had Odell Beckham find a new home. And, you know, leave it to the NFL in coming into Week 10, Commissioner. It's still huge stories all over the place. Nothing we could have expected.
You know, Balky, it was a wild week last week. Yes, player movement in directions which we did not expect. Our guest last week, his biggest takeaway from our conversation was that I was high on Love and he wasn't, and I'm going to cede victory to him, although Love, I think, stepped in and made a best effort in a situation where he did not get a lot of help from his teammates. But it's just fantastic opportunities for new players every week. And as a fantasy player, trying to dig their way into the FFPC playoffs, I think that's what the waiver wire offers you, is to try to anticipate where those opportunities and who might be getting their first opportunity this week.
Yeah, and I would say that Jordan Love didn't get a lot of help from his coaching staff either. That is another conversation for a different day. Maybe we'll get into it tonight. I don't know, but I do know this. Coming up on tonight's show, we will regale you with our thoughts on starting Myles Gaskin going forward after what we saw on Thursday Night Football against the Ravens. We'll talk about what better Week 10 options you might have than Aaron Rodgers after he has not practiced for 2 weeks. And then Praveer Shrivastava will join us to talk about his 10th place team in the FFPC main event, how likely Dan Arnold is to being a top 10 tight end in the FFPC for the remainder of the season. And, of course, much, much more. Shout out to the chat room right now. You guys can post any questions you might have in there if you want to connect with us on Twitter. The show is at HSFF Hour. I am at Eric Balkman. Praveer Shrivastava is at Praveer Shrivas1. And, as always, check out the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. Facebook.com /HSFF Hour is where to reach us. And if you want to chime in and talk with us, give us a call at 347-426-3682. That's 347-GAME-OVA. You can also email the show at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you have any questions for myself, for Farrell, for Praveer, now is the time to send them in. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, all the tweets, and all the emails in the fantasy feedback segment coming up later on in the show. I want to thank our audio engineer and my best friend Bryce, and our producer and mutual friend Rob for hanging out and making this show a lot more listenable than it would be if I was handling all that myself. I want to remind everybody, rotoviz.com/podcast is the home of the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. This week, I sat down with the defending FFPC main event, $500,000 grand prize winner Jerry Hooten. We talked about a lot of topics on the show. One of them that came up, and we spent a little bit of time talking about it, is if you are having a lot of success in the main event or in the Football Guys Players Championship, how do you manage your team properly as far as lineup setting goes when you're just trying to put points up and get to the championship round? A lot of lineup setting philosophy on this past episode. rotoviz.com/podcast is where to check that out. All right, let's get into the Fantasy Flash. Tom Pelissero on Twitter had this about Odell Beckham. It is a one-year contract with the LA Rams worth $1.25 million guaranteed. $3 million more are team-based incentives on this contract based on how LA finishes the regular season and the postseason. This appears to be a genuine priority for Odell Beckham to be very successful in the postseason after he had a really unproductive team career in New York. And then obviously in Cleveland, he had the torn ACL and much, much more there. I don't know if Beckham is going to be active on Monday. I know it's a possibility at this point against the San Francisco 49ers. But, Farrell, the million-dollar question here is, what do we do with Odell Beckham going forward? Is this a guy that can be flexed out? How does he affect Robert Woods? Does he affect Cooper Kupp at all? So your take, when you saw Odell Beckham sign with the Rams, from a fantasy standpoint, man, what did you think?
That was the question that everyone had to ask, Balky, and I'll go right to that, because we could do a whole show on the movement and how and the why, and answer the 5 W's of this situation, but I'll go right to it. I think all of us have been a wish I had when we look at Cooper Kupp. I don't know how often you have him on teams. I have him on just 2, and those are 2 of my better teams. Guess what? He's way outperformed his 3rd-round draft slot. Now, I believe that the signing of this player motivated on the field to ease Cooper Kupp's responsibility the rest of the way. We're looking at a guy that's already caught 74 balls. He's on pace to have 140 catches, even more than that, 200 targets. And we're seeing a wonderful football player play who's not physically limited for the first time in a long time. This guy's been beat up for years, and he answers the bell. It's a situation now, and it'll be a bitter pill to swallow for everyone that's grown used to Cooper Kupp having double-digit targets and very successful games. He'll continue to be successful, but it won't be outside of the spectrum of all the other receivers, the top elite receivers in the NFL. These numbers are going to come down to earth because I believe that Odell Beckham Jr. will get opportunities. I believe the real football reason that he is there is to give this player a break as this team prepares for the playoffs. They've got a playoff run, and really their biggest playoff, they're the one team in the NFL you can say that has a playoff game in December, because it's very important when they go to Arizona that they figure out a way to beat the Cardinals, a team that's probably playing better than anyone in the NFL. So that's my take on who it's going to hurt in fantasy numbers as far as opportunities in the game, and these tremendous numbers of passes and targets for Cooper Kupp are going. You can step on the brakes a little bit because it's going to be a little different moving forward.
So I think that's very lucid. I think that makes a lot of sense from a team that has championship aspirations. I will say this about Odell Beckham. I do believe that he is another weapon they can trot out there. I do believe he will have an impact. I think he's actually going to affect Robert Woods more than Cooper Kupp. I think with Stafford's connection for Kupp right now, it is so strong and so prevalent that I think he is going to continue to do still 85, 90%, maybe even 95% of what he was doing before. Robert Woods, I'm not so sure. I would be freaking out a little bit more if I was a Woods owner, knowing that Beckham's going to come into the fold more than Cooper Kupp. That's my personal take. You heard Farrell's, and I'll say this. My Green Bay Packers were in the running to sign Odell Beckham. And if you want juicy storylines, Odell Beckham, if he does not play Monday night against San Francisco, the Rams have the bye week in Week 11. And guess where Odell is in Week 12? It's Lambeau Field as the Rams come to take on the Packers. It is going to be the grudge game for Packers fans, not for Odell Beckham, but for Packers fans that were hoping to sign Odell Beckham. And I got to tell you, Farrell, I know people who are looking for tickets in Green Bay right now, and they can't get tickets for that Rams game. Everybody wants them. Seahawks game, yeah, there's tickets available. The Browns game, Vikings game, no problem getting those tickets. You want tickets to that Rams game in Lambeau Field? Good luck. You're probably not going to get them. Moving on here, talking about Cam Newton here, ladies and gentlemen. Cam Newton on the Panthers. Yeah, what year is it? No, it's not 2015. It's 2021. Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports says that Cam Newton could be active this week against Arizona as, quote, either an emergency player or subbing in for some special packages. Jones said that Newton will start in Week 11 against the Washington football team, and he still could play this week, but P.J. Walker will be your starting quarterback for the Panthers. Now, is Newton going to get inside the 10, inside the 5 at the goal line at quarterback? Yeah, maybe. I don't think anybody's starting P.J. Walker this week, but I think if you have Christian McCaffrey, there's certain concerns here. And really going forward, Farrell, and that's what the question I want to ask you here is, what's the impact that Cam Newton not only has on Christian McCaffrey, but on DJ Moore, on Terrace Marshall, on Robbie Anderson, quite frankly, and Tommy Tremble, the tight ends there as well. Your thoughts on how Cam Newton changes the value for these skill position players in Carolina?
He's going to get touches around the goal line for a team that's having great difficulty putting points on the board. You know, an agent friend of mine sent something over to me. He said Newton, Carolina is still affected by Newton's previous contract, at least in salary cap dollars, and they are paying for his replacement in Darnold, and now they are paying him to replace his replacement, and it's interesting, and you follow the money in this. I don't know. I don't think he's going to have a whole lot of effect unless he becomes starting, and that could happen. I want to see him throw the ball. It's a fascinating situation. I'm glad to see him back in the league. He's a player that deserves to be in the league. In Carolina, an interesting signing. You know, we spent all spring, Balky, talking to dynasty guys, and we talked dynasty football. The 2019 Mountain West Player of the Year quarterback, Josh Love from the San Jose Spartans, he is signed to the practice squad there in Carolina, and I think this kid can really spin it. So there's the best information I can give you on this whole Cam Newton thing, is advice to the dynasty guys to familiarize yourself with the quarterback who's now on the practice squad, because I don't think the guys on the existing roster are going to take this team anywhere where they need to be in the next year or two.
Yeah, the Carolina quarterback situation is going to be a fascinating one as we move to the offseason. A fascinating conversation that we're going to have here coming up in Week 10 is the Patriots and their running backs. Now, CLNS Media, Evan Lazar works for them, said that Ramondre Stevenson is expected to practice today and was looking good for Week 10 against the Broncos. Since that report, I can tell you that neither Damian Harris nor Ramondre Stevenson practiced today for New England. Now, this opens up the Brandon Bolden lovers out there that maybe could start him this week against Cleveland. J.J. Taylor is perhaps another guy who could work in. Farrell, what's your read? I mean, Stevenson nor Harris practiced this week. So if that's the case and they don't go, how startable is Brandon Bolden? How startable is J.J. Taylor for you, and how do you sort of assess this Patriots backfield situation against the Browns?
Brandon Bolden is a fascinating player, Balky. You know, in an age when we're talking about free agency, the players getting one-and-done opportunities to prove what they can do and then moving on. Brandon Bolden is a player that has been with this team for 9 years. I remember when he came out of Ole Miss. He's been, some years he's a special teams player. Other years he's an emergency third down pass catcher behind James White. If you look at his stats over the years, in 2013 he caught 20 passes, next year none. Then in 2015, 20 passes. Now he hasn't done anything for 7 years, hardly catching balls, and in 2021 he's already caught 22 passes. Here's the whole thing about it. I love the Brandon Bolden story, and I love him getting on the field and doing something this weekend. The reason I do, it's win. Harris, Andrews, Mason, and most especially Mike Owenu. All these guys are playing together. Not a one of them is really a superstar. Some of them have been cut and brought back to the team. But somewhere around in early October, after they benched Owenu, I forget what game it was, when they benched him during the game, that offensive line gathered themselves. They came back. Any New England Patriot running back, if he's on my roster in this limited opportunity of backs available to them, he's going on to my starting lineup because of those 5 offensive linemen.
Yeah, I just looked actually while you were talking about him to see if he was available in any of my Kentucky leagues. And he's available in one, but I'm loaded at running back in that one, so I won't be placing any bids on him.
Isn't that how it always is, Balky?
That's how it always is, my friend. That is how it always – you know what's – and I brought this up last week. I said how Adrian Peterson was out there in a couple of Kentucky leagues, and I'm like, man, I shouldn't bring this up on the show because my fellow competitors in Kentucky are going to hear this and overbid me. And sure enough, I said it was available in 2 leagues. I got overbid in 1 league. So, and I forgot who it was who outbid me on that one. But congratulations to you on getting Adrian Peterson, the starting running back here, heading into Week 10. A starting running back in Miami that Farrell, I know you were high on in the drafting season was Myles Gaskin. And certainly he has had his share of very good games. He's also had his share of some very bad games. Last night, Thursday night, 14 carries, 31 yards. He gets 1 catch for 14 yards. Now, in his last 3 games, he's gotten 46 carries. Okay, solid work, but only for 101 yards. That's 2.2 yards per carry. 10 catches over the last 3 games for just 56 yards. So, Farrell, you look at Week 11, they get the Jets. I mean, are you willing to roll the dice on Myles Gaskin once again next week, or is there a certain amount of trepidation for this guy, not only for his workload, but for what he's turning his workload into, how he's turning his workload into fantasy points or lack thereof?
I want to recover from Thursday night before I have to think about what I want to do with this player against the Jets. Now, yes, I was high on this player because I've seen him flash, and I looked at what the Dolphins were doing, and I said, you know, they're committed to this player. I've seen him do good things in the past, and it's part of a team effort, as we just discussed about the Patriots. There's very little support for Myles Gaskin to get anything done in a rushing attack in Miami because they just really don't have one. Last night was another failure. He's averaging 34.8 yards a game. He's caught 37 passes for 3 TDs. You've talked about him having good games, Balky. I think he had 1 good game. That was when he caught 10 passes against Tampa in the blowout loss, 45-17. He is the Fugazi of the draft, and I don't think we'll go to Planet Hollywood next year or Caesars Southern Indiana for any draft, and we won't hear more people say, this guy's on my no draft list, because for 5th or 6th round draft capital that everyone paid for him, we've got very little back. Now, I want to see the Jets play this weekend. It can't get any worse than it was the last time. But this has been a hell of a waste of a 5th and 6th round draft pick, and it's not all on Gaskin. It's in the coaching staff. It's in the game plan. It's in the offensive line. They're doing some things right at Miami, and they sure did on Thursday night. The running game is not one of them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one for sure. Let's get to tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen, and talk about a guy who is not that far off from a $500,000 grand prize based on his drafting this year. He's actually been playing in the FFPC. This is his 3rd year, and he's made the championship round in the main event in both 2019 and 2020. He's right in the mix, actually, of taking on that $500,000 grand prize, currently sitting in 10th place in the 2021 FFPC main event. Please welcome tonight's guest. You follow him on Twitter at Praveer Shrivastava. It is Praveer Shrivastava. Thank you so much for doing the show tonight, man. How you doing?
Hey, good, Balky. Thank you, and Pharrell for having me on tonight. I'm doing good. Thanks.
Yeah, no, we're very excited. Farrell and I both excited to have you on tonight because we don't often get players that are this late in the season this high in the main event. So thank you so much for joining us. We were going to talk fantasy football with you in a little bit, but before we do that, can you tell us what you're doing for a living when you're not hanging out in the top 10 of the FFPC main event?
Yeah, definitely. So, when I'm not focusing my time on fantasy football, I actually work in project management for an automotive company. So I basically create and maintain timing charts from kickoff to start of production for specific batteries and drive units that are going into the electric vehicles.
Wow. That's an impressive resume, sir. I think our good friend Brad Cruz is deep into that industry as well. If I were to buy that kind of new age vehicle, what would be the one? Where should I get in the driver's seat? What should I be sitting behind?
I mean, right now you can't go wrong with the Tesla, to be honest with you. But I think if you're looking at the future, the Cadillac Lyriq that's going to be coming out within the next few years, I think that's going to be a great vehicle to go for.
That looks like Balky in the Cadillac Lyriq. I can see that look. I can see that look for Balky. He's going places in this world, man, and that would be a great thing. Praveer, thanks. So you're in New York City. Which borough?
No, I'm in Michigan actually.
Oh, you're in Michigan. Well, that's where they're making the cars. So I guess I should have known that. So look,
where he's making the cars, Farrell. Not only that, where they're making the cars, as well as home of Brad and Tim Cruz, who you just mentioned as well.
Oh, you gotta love the Cruz brothers. They need to spend more time in Kentucky, but that's my only complaint about the Cruz brothers. Now, okay, let's talk fantasy football. You have two of my favorite receivers rostered on varied teams that you have, I understand. But when it comes to the Tampa Bay receivers, Evans and Godwin in the draft, I think you kind of flipped the order in popularity of how they were going. What made it against the grain? Tell us about how you worked through those Tampa receivers. And was there a situation where you attempted to stack as many players off that team as you possibly could?
Yeah, so basically, going into my pre-draft strategy, I was reading that Mike Evans came into training camp in amazing shape, probably I think the best shape in his career. And when I was looking at the numbers last year, Mike Evans ended up having almost double the amount of touchdowns compared to Godwin. I think it was 13-7. Let alone I think Godwin missed maybe 4 games last year, I think.
Right.
But I think Mike Evans became Tom Brady's favorite red zone target. And, last year was a different year with the pandemic, right? They got a brand new quarterback and, the team didn't really get to work with each other. And Mike Evans still ended up putting up 13 touchdowns last year. So I felt going into this year, Mike Evans is just going to keep improving and he's going to be the main target in the red zone for Tom Brady this year. And I know they've got Gronk on the team, but I felt that Gronk is he's a little too old, and I felt he was going to be injury prone. And as you can see, he's just a few weeks, and Evans has just been killing it this year.
Praveer, let's talk about Deebo Samuel a little bit. And I don't want to dwell on this because I think if there's one player that we have talked about with a lot of the high-stakes players on this show over the course of the last couple months, it's been Cooper Kupp. But I think a close second to that is Deebo Samuel because he slipped in drafts quite. I mean, there's so many people on Brandon Ayuk this year, and they let Deebo Samuel slip. Now, in this league for you, he slipped to you in the 8th round. You gobbled him up there. What did you see with Deebo Samuel that seemingly so many other high-stakes players in the FFPC missed this season?
Well, I understand the concerns with Deebo Samuel. He's had injury concerns back at his college days in South Carolina with, multiple hamstring injuries, a broken leg. Even last year, I think he had 2 different times he had grade 2 hamstring injuries. But as a rookie, when you look at Deebo Samuel, he ended up putting up like 800 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he ended up rushing for like 160 and 3 TDs. So he's very productive when he's healthy. And I felt at the 8th round, I went and looked back at my draft, and at the 8th round, I don't think there was anyone that I would have taken over Deebo Samuel. So when he fell that late, I just felt the risk was worth the reward. Or the reward was worth the risk, I mean.
Did the Samuel situation, did the quarterback controversy, you think, play into Samuel dropping as well?
Yeah, I think so, because you heard about Trey Lance going to be eventually taking over the starter, the whole situation with Garoppolo in the beginning of the year. And you didn't really know who was going to be quarterback at that time. And I just felt, because Ayuk was, I think, going in, 5th round, I think, of the FFPC, maybe 6th round, if I could remember back then. And, to get Deebo at the 8th round, I thought was probably one of the steals of the draft.
And Praveer, you had the coach say that the 49ers were going to run the ball 500 times. I remember that quote coming out. I'm not sure he thought it was going to run 500 times, but he was making that quote. Coach probably shouldn't make those quotes in the future. Just keep all that to himself. I think it's creating a bad vibe for him.
I completely agree. I agree with that.
Nobody paid any attention to one coach making quotes, and that was down at the Houston Texans. And still nobody has a good handle on Coach Gully. But I like the way his team is playing, and there were some players in our KFFSC before we got to Vegas. It was high on the 6'4" Michigan Wolverine receiver Nico Collins. Now, I know you picked up Nico Collins off the waiver wire early on. A lot of us were drafting him late. We're going to emerge. The Houston Texans team is going to emerge from the bye week soon, and I think they have some favorable matchups for the receivers going forward. And so I'm curious if this is a player on your better teams, on the teams you're challenging with, and with the bye weeks extended all the way through 14, is Nico Collins a player that could find a home in a starting roster for you as we move forward?
I think Nico can. The Texans ended up trading him, trading up in the draft to get him in the 3rd round. And, unfortunately he had the shoulder injury in the beginning of the year that made him miss a few games. But, like, in the limited production that he's had, he's averaging, 12.7 yards per reception. And now you've got Tyrod Taylor coming back with his hamstring injury. And, like you were saying, the Texans' schedule is a little bit favorable at the end of the year, right? And I think with the bye weeks coming up, I think he could be a potential flex play. So, I ended up picking Nico Collins in a lot of leagues just more for the opportunity that he has to add depth to my roster.
Talking with Praveer Shrivastava, the 10th place team owner in the FFPC main event heading into Week 10. Okay, so we saw what happened with the Ravens and the Dolphins last night. I guess, you look at what they have there. Tyson Williams is sort of an afterthought. It kind of comes down to Devontae Freeman, Le'Veon Bell. When Latavius Murray gets healthy, we'll kind of deal with that then. Is Devontae Freeman still the guy there, Praveer, or do you like Le'Veon Bell to be rostered and maybe make some noise in that Ravens backfield?
I think Freeman is the guy. I really don't trust Bell at all. If you're just looking at the stats alone, Bell is averaging like 2.7 yards this season alone. And unfortunately, when it comes to fantasy relevance, Bell hasn't done good, I think, since 2017, since he's been with the Steelers. So, it's been 3 or 4 years since he's had like a really productive season. And unfortunately, he's just not going to get that role to be the every down back. And at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson is the running back for the Ravens majority of the time. So, I don't trust Le'Veon Bell at all.
just staying with that game a second, I don't know if I can trust that coaching staff to be prepared to put together a running attack against many teams. I think that exposed a great deal of problems to the Baltimore offense and their inability to make changes last night. And you would think that with all the weapons they had, they could have done a better job of that. You know, a team that does not have a lot of weapons on offense, but still is competitive, still can get in the game, still beat the Tennessee Titans earlier this season, and has young players emerging. Michael Carter emerging. Elijah Moore coming into the role that we expected from him. And backup quarterbacks showing that they can come into a game and assert themselves and help their team win. The most interesting player on the New York Jets, to me, still a player I think could be playing for teams all across the NFL, is Ty Johnson. What's your opinion on this player? I think he was previously at Detroit, as I recall.
Yeah.
I think I'm right about that. I don't remember a great deal about him, but he's become a player that I really like so many aspects of his game. Is Ty Johnson a player now that you see as a complementary piece in the backfield, kind of similar to what we have at the Washington Football Club with Gibson and McKissick?
Yeah, you know, I think Ty Johnson can become really relevant in this New York offense. You know, even though Michael Carter is getting the bulk of the carries, Ty Johnson has been extremely productive in the receiving game and just in the limited touches that he's getting. Michael Carter and Ty Johnson, but Ty Johnson will give you that flex appeal because of his receiving abilities. If you look at the last 4 weeks, Ty Johnson has given you double-digit points and full-point PPR scoring. So the good thing is the Jets are usually going to be behind most games and will need to pass the ball quite a bit, and I think Ty Johnson's going to be a great asset.
All right, so Praveer, let's. I want to roll to the chat room right now. A couple of questions in there. Number one, the Dizzle and I just made a bet about Mark Ingram this week. We already know Alvin Kamara is out. Praveer, is he scoring more or less than 15 fantasy points in the FFPC this week as what we think should be the starting running back for the New Orleans Saints? Praveer, more or less or over under 15 points for Mark Ingram this week?
I'm going to go less than 15 points.
All right. That's what I like to hear because I'm on the under on that one. So that's good. So this is interesting because we were talking about it in the chat room. We kind of said, like, look, this is totally, and I totally think it's touchdown dependent. I mean, if that dude does not score a touchdown, I can't see him getting over 15 points. How do you see his game going this week, Praveer, for Ingram? Are you looking at like 50, 60 yards rushing, maybe a couple of catches, and that's about it? Or what do you see here?
Yeah, since I think, you know, Mark Ingram's going to be the number one back this week, you know, he's not going to put up the numbers that Kamara is going to put up. Like, there's just no chance. And, you know, I think the Titans are going to run away with this game. So I think at best he might get 50 yards. And like you said, maybe 1 or 2 catches, but I don't really think anyone on the Saints will probably be a good play this week.
No Michael Thomas, no Odell Beckham, and no Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. It's going to be Mark Ingram in the backfield, and you're going to have Trevor Siemian at quarterback, and I don't know, your number one receiver is Marquez Callaway. This is at Tennessee, so certainly not the toughest defense in the world, but not the easiest either. One other question, Praveer, is I go back up. I almost forgot about this. This came in at the start of the show, and I think this is from Cornell professor Hudson Kern Reeves. He wants to know, Jordan Howard, is he startable as a second flex in the FFPC main event and the Football Guys Players Championship this week? I think we talked about him earlier in the program a little bit, but your thoughts on Jordan Howard as a second flex, Praveer, if you need to do it. He's at Denver in Week 10.
If I'm desperate, I will put Jordan Howard in. I don't trust Philly against Denver this week, especially with what Denver did to the Cowboys last week. And, you know, I'm a huge Cowboys fan, so that stung a lot last week. But, yeah, I don't trust that Philly offense. I don't think Jordan Howard's going to be that successful this week. But, I mean, if he's your only option as a flex, then, I mean, you have to roll with him.
Praveer, I have to preempt. Balky, I got to preempt right here because you and the Dizzle are making bets. Praveer and I got to make a bet with you because if you're disappointed for what you saw as a Cowboy fan, and you know, as a Cowboy fan through fantasy football, I was disappointed too. How disappointed are you going to be when Matt Ryan dials them up for 350 yards this weekend?
Oh, the Cowboys are going to come out. Cowboys are going to come out on fire this week. There's no way that the Cowboys got embarrassed last week. That was just, I think they took the Broncos for granted, and I think Zeke is going to come out 150 yards, 2 touchdowns this weekend.
That could well happen, but Matt Ryan is going to dial up 350 on you. Balky, you better cue up that I Got 5 on it music. We can bring that back because Praveer and I have now entered. I've got over on Matt Ryan. I'm going 333. I'm going to ask you for 333 there, sir. I'm going over, and you may have the under. We good?
I'm good with that.
Yep, there you go. All right, hold on. Praveer versus Farrell. All right, so Luna's making a guest appearance on the show after several times away. Okay, so Praveer, let me ask you this, since I know you're a Cowboys fan. I don't think I have this in the show at all, which is on me. I should have put this in. But Michael Gelkin, who covers the Cowboys for the Dallas Morning News, says that Michael Gallup is going to play against the Falcons this week. So if you own Michael Gallup in any of your fantasy leagues, does he sneak in as a flex this week, knowing, one, that the Cowboys will be out for blood after what happened last week, and two, he's still got to contend for targets with Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, and Dalton Schultz. Your thoughts on starting Michael Gallup this week? Is it a desperation move?
It is a complete desperation move. You know, Michael Gallup hasn't played he hasn't played since week 1. And, you know, he did look like, I think it was he only, maybe played 1 quarter against Tampa Bay. He looked good. He looked good until that calf injury. But I think it's going to be more of a stretch this week because there's just so many options on Dallas's offense that, you know, it's kind of hard to trust Michael Gallup to come in and get 5, 6, 7, 8 targets. I just don't think that's going to be realistic this week.
All right, so let's move on, Praveer, and talk about tight ends here, since this is an FFPC podcast and I'm contractually obligated to ask you a tight end question. Dan Arnold, let's talk about him for Jacksonville. Is he going to be a top 10 tight end from week 10 going forward in the FFPC? Dan Arnold, top 10 tight end, yay or nay? What say you?
Oh, 100% Dan Arnold's going to be a top 10 tight end. You know, I think it's really important for young quarterbacks, such as Trevor Lawrence, to have a solid tight end. And I think it was a great move by the Jaguars for trading him. And, you know, I was looking at the game with the Jaguars. He was already tied with the most targets. And if you look the last 2 weeks, he's had 17 targets. And he's had 12 receptions for 128 yards. And, you know, at a 1.5 PPR for tight ends, that's amazing, you know. And I think, you know, Trevor Lawrence is just going to keep getting more comfortable with Arnold, and, you know, he's going to be a game changer for many managers in the FFPC playoffs.
Last week, I sort of poo-pooed a question about Dan Arnold, and I probably shouldn't have done that because I think he's a good pass catcher, and I followed him from team to team, but. You know, if we roll back the score sheet to last week, we see a classic 9-6 contest with Jacksonville. Well, you know, we do get the benefit of the 1.5 receptions, but I don't know if Arnold can find the end zone. And I think about the fact that all of those receivers down there, Dan Arnold, really, you know, I think this could be a splash in a very conservative pan for this player, but I don't know. But I wish I had him on my roster because when I went to waiver wire this past week, whoa, it's like farming on rocky ground, brother. I got to tell you, it's where we were with electric vehicles at the turn of the century. There, how difficult is it? How does your strategy change? I said something to Balky early in the show about you can't see it, you can't wait and see it, and then go get the player. Now you've got to project it. You got to see the player's going to play. And you've got to project what the player's going to do and go ahead and get him now before you see him. That's my philosophy late in the year. Does that differ anything from yours? How do you handle this? And do you still have a lot of fab budget in your accounts as your balance?
I agree with what you're saying is trying to get the players before they break out. In most of my main events, I will say I've used about 80% of my fab money trying to just go after those players before they have a breakout game. And, some of them worked out, and I'll tell you this, one person I went really high on, Philip Lindsay, and, he's been complete trash. So I spent, about 10% of my fab on 10% of my fab on him, and I'm 24 leagues. I probably got him in about, maybe 60-70% of my leagues. So that one kind of hurt.
All right, so I'm just kind of curious here, and we'll see. I think we got some time. I want to get to a couple of emails here and fast forward a little bit here, Praveer, because we got a couple of listeners that I want to get to their emails. Jeff in Baltimore is first up. He writes, do you have any insight into how much of a fantasy factor Josh Reynolds is going to be now that he's a Detroit Lion? Thanks, Praveer. That is Jeff in Baltimore. So this is interesting. Another, kind of under the radar thing that happened this week, with everything else going on. A lot of people didn't realize that Josh Reynolds not only was waived by the Titans, but that the Lions claimed him, off of waivers. So he is now a Detroit Lion. Jared Goff, who he caught passes from with the Rams, will be throwing him passes again. The Brad Holmes, who is the GM who drafted Josh Reynolds in L.A., is now in charge in Detroit. So that makes some sense why they would have claimed Reynolds off waiver wires. And there's not a whole lot else there. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is there, Quintez Cephas, but the cupboard is fairly bare on the perimeter. So, Praveer, Josh Reynolds in a Lions uniform, is this something that fantasy owners need to be paying attention to?
Yes, I think you can pay attention to it. I don't know how much stock I'm going to put into any Detroit Lions besides DeAndre Swift. Maybe Jamal Williams when he comes back, but I can't trust the receiving core. I can't trust Jared Goff. Unfortunately, it's been pretty ugly watching the Detroit Lions this year. And besides DeAndre Swift, I don't really trust anyone on the Detroit Lions or Hawkinson. My apologies, I forgot Hawkinson was on there too. So besides Hawkinson or Swift, I don't really trust anyone else on the Lions.
And by the way, Mia culpa here, as the Dizzle pointed out in the chat room, 1 month ago today, the Lions put Quintez Cephas on IR with a broken collarbone. So it's even worse in Detroit, and even a bigger opportunity for Josh Reynolds. And we'll see what happens there. I can't know it all. I can only know part of it. I count on the listeners for a lot of the show content.
I think you were thinking of Khalif Raymond there, Balky. Those two.
Yes. Khalif Raymond, he goes from 7 targets to 0 targets in a single week. The anti-superhero, essentially, what they have in Detroit. Speaking of listeners, let's get to Brian in Ramsey, New Jersey's question. He says, with Kyler Murray playing in the late slot on Sunday, do I need to keep a backup on my roster, or is he worth the roll of the dice so I can keep my roster intact? Thank you so much, not only for listening, but for emailing in. That is Brian in Ramsey, New Jersey. Okay, so the latest on Kyler Murray today was that I believe he did, in fact, practice today, but he is listed as a game-time decision at that 4:05 mark for the Panthers-Cardinals game. Kingsbury said all situations are being considered, but, quote, if Murray is ready to play, he will play. Cardinals are 11-point favorites at home against Carolina. We all saw what Colt McCoy was able to do. So what's the proper way to do this, Praveer? I mean, if you have a roster spot, do you pick up Colt McCoy so you just plug him in if Murray's inactive? Are you willing to go with Murray as your only quarterback, believing he will play? How do you handle this from a high-stakes fantasy football perspective?
I would have a backup to be safe. If, potentially if Teddy Bridgewater is available, Kirk Cousins, which I highly doubt, but if someone else is available, I don't think you can put all your eggs on one basket for Kyler Murray this week. They're playing the Cardinals this week, which I think, we saw what the Cardinals did to the 49ers last week. I did not see that coming last week. The Cardinals just annihilated them. And so I think it's probably in the Cardinals' best interest to let Murray sit out one more week, just get fully healthy, and then have him come back week 11 and go from there. But I think it's best to have a backup QB just in case.
Farrell, I am fresh out of emails. This is on you, man. The final question we have for Praveer tonight. That's all I got. Yeah.
I mean, Hudson Kern-Reed, by the way, is getting such directed questions that he's co-opting the talent that comes into the show and utilizing their brain power to help put his teams together. It's the next thing HUD's going to do is just send in his roster and ask the guests to pick it. That would be an interesting. That would be an interest, but I digress. Oh, I loved Hudson Kern-Reed. I loved.
He's the best.
I loved. Yes, he is. I love drafting in Las Vegas. Being out there on the kickoff weekend, this is a tradition that I won't miss. And Praveer, you were there in person this year?
Yes.
And you'll be there next year, of course. And I would like you to join me, and let's go all around the room and find all the excuses. I think 2022 will have more excuses of why players didn't win in 2021 because they can start at the first pick and go through every pick in the first round and say, because this happened to my first-round pick, this is why I didn't win. But for this special weekend, when it's getting down to it and we've got to score some points and we've got to have some wins, who is the highly drafted player that you normally trust but you don't trust him this week? And who is a sleeper that perhaps you haven't played yet or perhaps you haven't played in a while that you really have high hopes for?
So my regret this week, and I hate to say this, but Patrick Mahomes. I can't trust Mahomes. The last 3 weeks he scored less than 20 points, and it's just been kind of a frustrating year of seeing the Chiefs struggle so much. So right now I think Mahomes is the guy that I would sit as a high draft pick. But my sleeper for the week, I really like Deontay Harris from the Saints, Saints wide receiver.
He has played better consistently through the year. What do you think makes him so much better than Callaway or any of the other complimentary receivers? They've got Smith back down there. Do you think it has something to do with the quarterback? Do you think it's just a maturation of the player? Is he just a better player? What is it about Harris that you like?
Yeah, I think it's just more the maturation and then him just being, just a better player overall. There was a lot of hype this year on Callaway, and he hasn't lived up to that production, and they need someone else to step up. And I think Deontay Harris is just, if you've been looking at the last, actually really just this year in general, when he's played, he's been fairly productive in a full-point PPR league. And, I just think he's going to continue to get better. And, I think he will definitely be a sleeper this week.
Very good. Thank you.
Praveer, who he doesn't play in FFPC, but I have a buddy who plays he's more of a casual player, but he plays in a golf league. A bunch of his buddies in a golf league, and he has kept Deontay Harris on his team, seemingly since week 2. With no Michael Thomas and Traquan Smith gets hurt. He's still got and I told him over and over again, drop this guy. You don't need him. Yeah. Well, now this week, I will tell him that this is the week to play Deontay Harris in your flex spot. I got it from a good authority on the 10th place team in the FFPC main event, Praveer, Shrivastava. And Praveer, I'm going to tell you this right now. If you happen to lose this Matt Ryan bet with Farrell, you're going to go to the opening game viewing party at Planet Hollywood next year. You'll buy Farrell a bourbon with part of your $500,000 grand prize that you win on the main event. You'll buy him his bourbon to pay off the bet. I will more than happily buy you a drink there to congratulate you on your $500,000 grand prize. If it happens that way. If it doesn't happen that way, I'm still going to buy you a drink. Doesn't matter. But I look forward to seeing you in person in Vegas this next year. And good luck the rest of the way, man. I hope the ball bounces your way not only this week, but in the subsequent weeks coming up. We're rooting for you. Hopefully you can take down this grand prize. And thank you so much for doing the show this week, man. Be good.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Praveer.
You follow him. Thank you, Praveer. You follow him on Twitter at Praveer Shrivas1, and he is the 10th place team in the FFPC main event right now, heading into week 10. Double-digit weeks already, Farrell. It's insane. It's flying by. Can't get enough of it. It's so much fun, And I think I'm having an okay season, maybe an okay to above average season, but. Man, I just relish this time of the year. It is so much fun.
Yes.
Placing bids, setting lineups, and grinding it out and trying to find my way to a big grand prize. As I know you're doing the same thing right now.
I looked at your teams, Balky. You're doing very, very well in Kentucky, and you will be a follow-up champion in our Sweet 16s. And you've got to show up down here for the Super Bowl party and draft in that one. Despite the only way you can get out of that is if your Packers go somewhere, which is looking less likely all the time. What color Cadillac are you going to get when that Eclipse? I think that's the name of it. Ellipse comes out.
You know what's funny about that? I just had to buy a new car less than a month ago because my other one, actually when I was in Vegas, I found out that my car was broke and it was basically totaled. I needed a new one, and I told my wife, I'm like, look, honey, I don't want to be involved in this process at all. You take care of it. You buy it. You pick out whatever. And she brought one car home for me to test drive. I took it for a spin once around the block. I said, yeah, this is fine. And I had two choices on color. I had sort of a gray color, and then the one I test drove, which is not an electric blue, but it's a very bright royal blue. And my son really liked it. He said, he said, Dad, you got to get the blue one. And I said, okay, let's get the blue one. And the more I drive it, I really enjoy driving like a brightly colored car like that. It just, I don't know, it just pops. It makes it more fun to drive. So whatever Cadillac I get, it will not be the dull gray, black or brown or anything like that. It's going to be something that pops. Probably not a yellow.
I like that.
But yeah, something that pops. We'll see what happens.
Packer green with a yellow stripe down it. That would be good.
See, now you're talking. Yeah, and I can get the Packers to put. They'll pay me to put a logo on it and everything. It'll pay for itself. I like the way you.
See if we can get that deal done.
All right, so let's see if we can get these deals done for the listeners that wrote in this week about some start-sit decisions. And the Dizzle says I don't play enough drops, so I am going to play another one tonight for all these people for the start or sits, aka the SOSs. All the people sending out SOSs to us this week. By the way, that was ABBA, right? On the
Making a big comeback.
And I was just going to say, I found out from Bryce the commish that they just released a new album, Farrell. Is that true?
That is, and they've got a worldwide tour, and they're selling tickets briskly.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, their first new album in 40 years. This is insane. Concert residency in London. This is crazy. This is crazy. So, ABBA, maybe we can get them as guests on the show going forward, promote their new album. All right, moving forward. Michael in Columbus, Ohio, home of the Buckeyes. He writes, hey, guys. Well, I never thought I'd be asking this question when I drafted Antonio Gibson in September, but do I sit him for Dearness Johnson this week in my Football Guys League? I'm already playing Najee Harris, the Magic Cord, Cordarrelle Patterson, and James Conner, so I only have room for one of these guys in my lineup. TIA, that is Michael in Columbus, Ohio. Michael, congratulations on acquiring all those running backs over the course of the season. So what is it, Farrell? I mean, if he's made up his mind that Patterson, Harris, and Conner are all starting for him, does he bench Gibson for Dearness Johnson this week?
Yeah, okay, I'm going to say this is a two-part answer, and I'll get to it quickly. If you like Praveer and you're sitting on top of the world in the FFPC, maintain with Antonio Gibson. He's your guy. He's your sure thing, despite the fact he's playing the Bucs, and they don't give up much in the run. Patriots have been uncommonly average in their run defense this year, and Dearness Johnson is the guy that might propel you to a very big game. So if you're playing catch-up in the standings, if you're in the FFPC and don't have one of those asterisks next to your name, or maybe you've got the fourth one for the fourth seed, Dearness Johnson is the guy that you want. You know, Dearness Johnson did so many great things in the last game. I'm just in the game prior to Cleveland's last game. I'm looking forward to him and having an opportunity to play here against New England and be the number one back. However, this game is more about Baker Mayfield and what he can do with his arm. Don't expect those big numbers, but expect those big, angry runs from Dearness Johnson, breaking tackles, and winning over the hearts of fantasy players everywhere. Gibson, if you're on the top of the heap, if you're a challenger like most of us are, Johnson's your man.
I think that's solid analysis there, and the Dizzle is saying Johnson is who he's going with. Antonio Gibson, the first week of the season, he gets 90 rushing yards and 5 catches. Those were both season highs. Since that 90 yards rushing, he has not been able to crack 70 yards rushing. Since those 5, I beg your pardon, he had 3 catches in week 1 on 5 targets. 3 catches in week 1. He has not been able to top 3 catches. That is his season high there. It's been pretty rough the last few weeks. I think Dearness Johnson is probably the guy I would go with over Antonio Gibson. All right, coming up here, this is Rich in Bloomington, Illinois, and it sounds like he has a would you rather
Would you rather
question.
get a massage from a man or surgery from a female doctor?
Would you have sex with Cleveland if it meant you could have sex with Angelina Jolie?
Who would you rather do? What would you guys rather be? Who would you rather start a small business with?
Who would you rather have sex with?
Do you want breakfast, or would you rather chew on your own ass as usual?
What?
All right, so Rich in Bloomington, Illinois. Both Russell Gage and Elijah Moore made me happy with their performances this week, but I can only start one in week 10. Who would you guys rather go with? Keep up the great work on this podcast. That is Rich in Bloomington, Illinois. All right, Farrell, so Russell Gage this week gets the matchup that we talked about earlier with Praveer. He is at Dallas this week. And then you look at Elijah Moore in week 10. He is going to be at home against the Bills. Who would you go with here, Gage or Moore?
Elijah Moore is by far the talented player, but you're going to dial it back and go with Russell Gage, and you're betting on the arm talent of Matt Ryan. Anyone that doesn't understand what Matt Ryan's doing, it doesn't look sexy like some of the dual threat quarterbacks. This is a 30-plus, maybe 35 touchdown guy going forward. He's hit over 300 yards multiple times. I think as many as 6 times this year. He had a rough start. He had a rough game, I believe, in England, and a lot of people saw that. He's having a hell of a year. And if you saw the Dallas Cowboys play and get exposed in the secondary last time, you have to think that Russell Gage is going to have a big, big part of what Matt Ryan's going to do. He's my guy here over Elijah Moore in a tough matchup with questionable quarterbacks that will be challenged against that opponent.
I listen to Farrell's advice here, and I go to the robot Rastafarian to see what he says. And I totally agree with Farrell. I think that's right. I think you have to start Russell Gage. Think about all the targets he got last week. The thing is with Elijah Moore, it's tempting to start a guy who's coming off a 2-touchdown week. That doesn't always, translate from week to week. So I think Gage is a safer play. I think Matt Ryan, as you just said, Farrell, with the bet with Praveer Shrivastava, that there is going to be a lot of passing going on in that game. I am with you. Russell Gage over Elijah Moore in Week 10. All right. Let's get to another email here. Ted in West Palm Beach, Florida. It seems like Dawson Knox is good to go with that broken hand. If he's active, do I just start him? My other option would be Tyler Conklin. Ted, thank you for the email in West Palm Beach, Florida. Farrell, the last I saw of Dawson Knox was that he did indeed practice today, and it sounds like he is going to be good to go at the New York Jets this week. The other option for Ted is Tyler Conklin, who is at the Los Angeles Chargers. Would you go Knox over Conklin?
I think what Buffalo is looking to do in this game, and based on what we saw with the Jets against Indianapolis, they're likely to do it and likely to be successful, is to discover their running game. To advance in the AFC, they're going to have some type of quality running back efforts, and this is a good time to get it going. So I think that's where the emphasis is with Buffalo this weekend, and there's many targets, as we all know. Dawson Knox is not necessary, would be perhaps the best word that I could use, or not the number one thing that we're looking to accomplish if we're putting together the game plan of the Buffalo Bills. Now, Tyler Conklin had to go overtime to get 5 catches for 45 yards, but when you look at the total effort, 28 passes from Kirk Cousins last week, despite the fact the game went in overtime. So he's getting a lot of attention from Kirk Cousins. So that's a player that I'm going with in this matchup.
All right, so I have one reaction to Farrell's advice on whether I agree with him on Knox versus Conklin. 9. I got to go with Knox here. I'm going with the talent. I understand. Farrell makes some very lucid arguments and very, very good ones. However, and this kind of goes back to like what we were talking about with the Johnson versus Gibson discussion. It's like, where are you going here? I think that Knox, when he's been healthy, even with the presence of Diggs, Sanders, Beasley, he was still getting a lot of touchdown looks. He was still getting a lot of targets. So I'm going to roll with him against the Jets this week in sort of a quasi-revenge game after what Buffalo did or really didn't do against Jacksonville last week. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of mouths to feed in Minnesota, too, with Jefferson and Thielen and Osborne, quite frankly, who stepped up this week. Sounds like Dalvin Cook's going to be out there as well. So I'm going to roll with the upside with Dawson Knox. I could be wrong. It has happened before. We will see if it happens again. Final email tonight from Jake in Phoenix. Not Jake from State Farm, unless it's State Farm in Phoenix. Hey there, HSFF Hour. What's the good word from Cheesehead Land? Can I play Aaron Rodgers even though he hasn't practiced in 2 weeks? Or is the quote-unquote safer play Jalen Hurts in Denver? I'll be listening to your analysis. That is Jake in Phoenix. So, Farrell, the latest I've heard with Aaron Rodgers up here is the Packers expect him to be cleared. They expect to start him. But Nathaniel Hackett was talking about this, the offensive coordinator for Green Bay, earlier this week, saying, there is no comfort this week because, even though Aaron Rodgers is, first ballot Hall of Famer, you still want to see him go up against that first-team defense during the week in running the plays that they plan on running against Seattle on Sunday. They don't have that this week, and Zoom calls really don't give them that same comfort. Jordan Love's been working with the starters. Jordan Love talked with the media today. Aaron Rodgers didn't. We will find out tomorrow, Saturday afternoon, whether Rodgers is cleared and he makes, passes the NFL protocols. But knowing that he has not been on a football field, in like almost 2 weeks here, what do you say? Would Jalen Hurts be the guy for you in fantasy over Rodgers, or would you roll with Aaron Rodgers against the Seahawks?
Not in this matchup on the road against this Broncos team. And I would also say that if you could tell me the rest of the season that I could have Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback, but he's not going to practice, and I can have Jalen Hurts healthy and fully available, I'm still taking Aaron Rodgers. So I'm in a situation here where this once he gets back on the field, I think that's the best place for Aaron Rodgers. He's a little beat up right now. He needs these teammates he can trust. He needs a big bounce back. I think this team rallies around him, and the Seahawks don't cause him much trouble. But the Broncos are going to give Jalen Hurts a rough day. And Jalen Hurts has magic in fantasy football. He can hit that 25-point number, whether he looks good doing it, whether the team wins or loses. Actually, when they had the big win, it I think was one of his poorer point performances of the year. Jalen Hurts is a wonderful quarterback, but I'm never going to put Aaron Rodgers down for him.
Yeah, I mean, here, now you look at this, we will know if Aaron Rodgers is cleared sometime Saturday afternoon. I expect him to be cleared. If he is cleared, sure, I cannot conceivably put Jalen Hurts in over Aaron Rodgers. The Seattle defense is not, the Legion of Boom that we have seen before. They got some playmakers, but it's not great. So I think Rodgers, despite being too weak, now I don't think he's going to shred him. He's not going 350 yards or whatever and 3 touchdowns on him. But I think Rodgers going 250, 260, couple of touchdowns, maybe 20, 30 rushing yards. I think that's definitely doable, and I think he does that against Seattle. And this is my take on Hurts. This dude waits until the second half of games to turn in solid fantasy performances week in and week out. At some point, that's got to stop. I don't care if the Broncos have Von Miller or not. I don't think he can do that this week. And that's why I'm rolling with Rodgers over Jalen Hurts, and that's where I stand on it, assuming he's obviously cleared, of course. Farrell, great analysis, great conversation, great interview tonight with Praveer Shrivastava, the 10th place team owner in the FFPC main event. I hope the ball bounces your way this weekend and you have a great week 10, and we will do this again next week prior to week 11, and we'll have another great guest on and hopefully help people get set for their FFPC and KFFSC playoff runs, man. We follow you on Twitter at KFFSC. We'll check out the KFFSC at KFFSC.com. Thanks again, man. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Balky. You too.
Thank you, Farrell Elliott. Ladies and gentlemen, that will complete tonight's broadcast of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. I want to thank Praveer Shrivastava, Farrell Elliott, the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and, of course, each and every one of you. A reminder to listen to the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown with Jerry Hooton, rotoviz.com/podcast. That's where you can find that as well. We return live on Friday at 10/9 Central with another great guest, and hopefully a guest that's in contention. We're getting to that time of year where it's difficult to get guests on because people don't want the HSFFO or curse of coming on the show and then not doing so hot that week. But hopefully we'll get another great guest on this coming week. That is at 10/9 Central this coming Friday. Thanks so much for listening. Good luck in Week 10. I hope the ball bounces your way. Your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and heard around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Thanks for listening, everybody. This is a weird time for me because normally I get some work done and upload the show to YouTube and get it on for all the people who like listening to it on YouTube the following day. I have to be on a plane roughly 8 hours from now, and I am in no mood to go to sleep. So it is going to be a very short night, and I will be flying all day tomorrow till I get to Florida for an impromptu mini vacation that my wife booked. Hopefully I get all my lineup set and have a good time down there. In any event, I can't wait to talk with each and every one of you next Friday. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great week, everybody.